Balance isn't about standing still. It's not about splitting time perfectly between work and life. That's a myth. Real balance is momentum. It's knowing when to lean in, when to step back, and how to stay in control when everything is moving fast. Brian Manning built his success by rejecting the outdated idea of balance and embracing something better, alignment. The ability to go all in on big goals without losing what matters most. This is Balance in Motion, a new way of thinking, a new way of living. Because the people who achieve the most aren't looking for balance, they're mastering the flow. Let's get into it.
Welcome to Balance in Motion podcast. Super excited to be here today. Today, we're talking with Steve Remmert. Steve Remmert has been an agent for 20 years. Has it been 20 years or just over 20 years now, I think?
I think it's about 22 years.
Unbelievable. 22 years. In the last 22 years, he's helped just over 1,000 people, households buy or sell a home. That's just over $1 billion of volume. Big numbers, definitely a very fruitful and successful career, but I'm excited to be here and talk with you as well, because in our podcast, we're trying to really peel back the onion and look at the layers on is, what does balance look like, or what does your flow look like? Certainly as you're going through and you have this kind of career accomplishing these numbers, there's likely sacrifices that have been made along the way. And I'm not really wanting to harp on the negative of the sacrifices, but for any entrepreneur or new agent or mortgage lender coming into this, I just think it's helpful for them to understand, from someone that's been in the industry for a long time and had good success, what did life look like? And then, if we look back on it, is there anything that maybe we do differently? Because I just think if we look at social media, it's just such a facade on social media and everyone just has the perfect life. And the reality is it's not perfect. So Steve, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. And I just love to have a conversation with you about kind of what your path has looked like. Yeah, I guess my first question would be, you've built a career in one of the most competitive markets in Colorado. Was there ever a version of your journey that included balance or, that really have found your flow, or are you just kind of finding that now? How has the journey gone for you?
That's an interesting question. Yes, there has been a period of time where I've been able to establish a little bit more balance, but that hasn't been until much later in my career. When I somewhat staffed up with people to help me along the way, which I would highly recommend. I mean, I think I hired my first assistant within 2 weeks of being in the business,
Wow.
realizing that there is a lot of side work that has to be done. And if you want to grow, you need the help to do it. But, I think balance can be accomplished, but I think it's setting a realistic expectation as to what balance looks like for you as an individual. One of the first questions I always ask new agents when they're getting in this business, and they would ask me, how do I create balance? One of the first questions I ask them is, do you want to? I mean, first ask yourself the question of, let me tell you the sacrifices I've made along the way and the lack of vacations and the Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays of work. I think I spent my first 15 years working. I mean, I would go 75, 60 days without a day off.
Wow.
They were really hard, but it was also really exciting to watch a business grow and develop a client base and to see success. So I never had any regret during those days, but obviously that's got a window to it. You can't sustain that existence for forever. I was fortunate that I had an appreciative and understanding partner. My wife is, she knew what she signed up for when we started this whole path. I never got static from her along the way. I think that's a very important part of establishing balance, is having a conversation with your partner to say, what is this path forward going to look like if it takes the trajectory that we want it to take?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good comment. It makes me think, I feel like a lot of struggles people have when you have a high producing entrepreneur in a relationship is keeping the relationship going and the communication there, where one person is trying to accomplish or build something big and the other person's kind of struggling to accompany that. Any suggestions there? I mean, communication with your spouse or your partner along the way it's a It's a tough one to keep everybody aligned in the family. And any thoughts there for younger people that are really trying to achieve something and they're maybe even new into a relationship and it's hard to accomplish all this and have great communication.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's important to define those parameters right up front to say, this is what my life looks like. We might have planned to go skiing, but I might have to cancel the night before because I have a client that just wants to go look at houses tomorrow. So I think defining those expectations right up front and making sure that you're both, standing on the edge, looking in the same direction, I think is perhaps one of the most important things you can do to sustain a relationship. And then, one of the things I've always said is throughout my career, I've always said you have to live your life between the seams. We've got many, many appointments. They extend into the night, they extend into the weekend, but we also have quite a bit of time off, between those appointments. And it may not be the conventional, you work 9 to 5 and you get Friday, Saturday and Sunday off. But sometimes we've got gaps in our day in the middle of the day. And to be sure that you take advantage of those gaps, either with your family or for yourself, to do the things that keep you healthy and happy.
Sure. I know you're a big mandolin player.
I am.
So how did you find time for, I've tried to play instruments and it takes a lot of time and effort to really stay up on it and be in the scene and, stay with your friends in that. How do you find the time to kind of get that in there as well?
Fortunately, most music stuff happens at night. And I'm willing to sacrifice sleep to do the things that I love to do. So there was a lot of later nights and tired mornings. But again, that was something that was always really important to me to make sure that stayed a part of my life. And even as a parent, obviously balancing all of those variables becomes really challenging. But I firmly believe it can be done, again, not setting yourself up for disappointment, but by aligning realistic expectations and doing good time blocking. Like, have a dedicated time. This is when I'm scheduled to either play music or go for a bike ride or be with family, be with kids, really like carving out those times. Everyone always says set boundaries. I think boundaries can be really hard to set when your schedule is so fluid as your business and my business are. Those boundaries can be difficult to set because you never know when that phone call is going to come in or when something's going to pop up that needs immediate attention. But that's part of what we're signing up for.
For sure.
Yeah.
Circling back to something you said before. So you got into the industry. One of your first hires was an assistant. I think, did you say 2 weeks in, you hired someone?
Yeah. She was a person I met in my real estate class.
Great. I think a lot of people are afraid to invest in themselves. And clearly you came out and you recognize that hiring an assistant was essentially investing in yourself and
Yep.
investing in your business. But a lot of people don't make that decision so early in their career. Did you have a mentor or was there anything at that time that how did you realize that so early on? So many people, kind of swing the bat at this career for so long and they finally realize they have to hire someone, but you just did it right away.
I did. And, I think, it definitely was a risk because it was expensive and I didn't have a lot of money. So there was risk that came with that. But I also looked at myself and tried to look at my strengths and weaknesses. And certainly one of my weaknesses is I'm not a super detailed person. I'm great with people. I'm great on the big picture. But when it comes down to tracking everything, the level that I like to have everything tracked, especially when you've got so much noise in the background of work and life, I knew that I needed that help to make sure that I stayed doing the best that I could, that I performed the best that I could for my clients. So I tried to hire my countersuit, someone that's very organized and very detail driven, and that really would keep me on task. And if anything, that gave me more freedom and it proved to be, it allowed me to focus time on the things that actually were income generating versus more tedious details.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. I don't think enough people invest in themselves in their business early on right away. Or perhaps identify, back to what you said, it sounds like you identified really quickly where your strengths and weaknesses were and where you could really excel and were honest with yourself on where that was, and then hired someone to really help you shine in the areas that where your strengths are.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I think people often overlook is defining themselves as a business. They look at themselves as an individual and as an agent, but not necessarily as a business. And one thing I did very early was I actually wrote out a business plan for myself as a realtor and how I was going to grow my business and the steps that I would take to do so. And I think people think that their overarching, company, in my case, Compass, that's the business. Well, in reality, we're all entrepreneurs working within our own little sphere of our business. And I think really treating it as that, whether you have a client the next day or not, you're still showing up working and treating yourself as a business. Even if you're a day one agent, try and put in a full week's work. Even though you may not think you have something to do, there's always
Sure.
something to do.
Yeah, it makes me think back. One of the first business coaches I had made me write a post-it note and put on my phone that said Brian Manning LLC.
Yeah.
To treat and to every day look at that and realize that this is running a business, regardless, like you said, of the overarching company where we might hang our licenses, but we are still running our own. We are the CEO of our own business every
Absolutely.
single day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well put.
So let's talk about vacations. So in the crux of your career, and after 20 years, I don't want to say you're on the tail end, but you might have a little more freedom now than you did before. In the crux of it, were you able to take vacations? What did time look like?
No, I didn't. I mean, almost in a comical way. My friends used to poke fun of me that I never leave Boulder, but fortunately, I happen to really, truly love what Boulder offers. And often I would go on vacation and ask myself, why did I go on vacation? I really like it here. So, everything I love to do sits within 20 miles of where I am. So I did not take a lot of vacations, mainly because I felt like getting away from my work. The phone still rang, email still came in, text still came in. It was almost hard to enjoy being away. So for me, I more opted not to go anywhere. There are plenty of high producing agents that take a lot of vacations and have been more successful in that facet of their life. I'm not that person.
But it worked for you.
It did. It
Yeah.
did. I mean, I was super grateful for everything, for every day I get to live in Boulder. I've always been grateful for it. I have gone on a little bit more vacations recently and I love every place I go, but I don't regret that choice to mainly stay in Boulder.
My wife and I talk about this all the time. We love to travel, and you can learn so much from traveling. But for some reason, every time we're driving to the airport, it's clear blue skies, and in the mirror behind us are snow-capped mountains. And
Yeah,
we just forever say, we live in such an amazing area. Why are we leaving? And leaving is good. I understand that. But we're like you. We understand that it's amazing to love where you live. And I think that also has an impact on your psyche, and it lets you really build your business and work because, kind of like you said before, when you're operating in the spaces that are allowing you to go play music, ride bikes, spend time with your family, it's easy to enjoy those spaces when you really love where you live.
for sure. For sure. I mean, I always say one of the smartest decisions I've made in life was my choice to come to school here and ultimately locate and raise a family here. That I will be tremendously grateful for.
For sure. I love it. I
Yeah.
think a lot of younger agents coming in just really want it all: boundaries, balance, freedom, high income, everything early on in their career. Anything you would say, if they're serious about making it to the top? I understand you want it all in the beginning, but what it really looks like, when you peel back the onion and you want all of it, what does it really look like? Because social media shows one thing, but that's just a facade.
I I agree. I mean, I think a new agent coming in, again, it's defining some realistic growth parameters, setting the goalposts for yourself to not be disappointed, recognizing that early on in your career, a great deal of your business is going to come from within your own network. So being sure that you are proud of what you do and to reach out to that network consistently and be appreciative of anything that they do to support you. I think it's really important. You know, it's often like I see younger agents coming in and saying, I want to capture the luxury, you know, the ultra luxury market. You're not going to. I mean, there may be an exception, but you're competing against someone that's been doing it for, you know, 30 years, earning their place in that business. You know, grow your business from your own demographic up, you know, and especially when you're young, you've got all your friends who are just moving into that purchasing age. They're having kids. They're, you know, life changes are happening a lot. When you get to my age, those life changes start to slow down, you know, short of retirement or downsizing, those life changes start to slow down. My friends aren't having kids anymore, or they're not, you know, they're that phase is done. So I
Mhm.
think recognizing, you know, that you're riding the wave along with your peer group, and that's where your business is largely going to come from. I've never been a huge fan of social media advertising or any of the, I don't want to say the more gimmicky advertising. Nothing beats your network. So whatever you can do to establish your place within that network, and to continually be expanding that network, that to me, that has always been the pathway to success.
I love it. You know, I mean, if we look at your website now, we look at your listings, it's a lot of luxury, ultra luxury. In the beginning phase of your career, was it first time home buyers? You know, were you grinding away just, you know, with the yeah, first time home buyers or move up buyers? Like you said, you know, you don't start in the ultra luxury. There must have been a time where you're just slugging it out, establishing
100%.
yourself.
Absolutely. The early on in my career, it was, you know, and also Boulder's market isn't what it is today. But early on in my career, I mean, it was anything I could possibly do. I'd drive an hour to show a house, and price point was irrelevant. I was just grateful to be growing. And it's funny, some of my ultra luxury buyers are people I worked with on their first time home purchase when they were buying a 500,000 or $300,000 house. And, you know, life changes around you, and you know, your business grows with you, or your friends, you know, ability to step up grows as you do. So don't discount any of your early or lower price point buyers. You never know where life's going to take them. And I've got clients I've done, you know, no less than 10 or 12 transactions with, that all started with a small purchase.
I also say you don't know who their family members are, you don't know who their friends are. You
Absolutely.
help one person and you have no idea what that opens the door to for other introductions. So
Yep.
I
Yep.
definitely agree. So now, 20 years into this, do you feel like you have balance now? Are you able to travel a little more? How does life feel now for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say life is. I've definitely I've forced myself to create a little bit more balance, but it is a force myself kind of thing. You know, as you know, we're all, you know, anybody that's, you know, playing in the tops of these arenas are competitive by nature, and we are relatively type A personalities. So I really have to force myself to turn off. But I've got, you know, I've got a network around me that I 100% trust and have worked with for a very long time, that, you know, the hardest part for me has been surrendering some of that, you know, taking away my, you know, the control nature of that we probably all have, and saying the world's not going to end if I go away for 10 days. And you know what? It doesn't. Yeah. So that's been a big part of it, is trust, you know, developing a network that you really trust, that will treat your clients in the same way that you have always treated your clients.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it's hard when you have built a business and we're, you know, all controlling people that are running our businesses, surrendering and relinquishing to other people. It's tough, especially when you've been running at a high speed for so long.
Yep.
To force yourself to make that change, it's challenging. Like I suck at it, to be honest with you. It's just it's just my wife will tell you, we go on vacation around the world and anywhere we go, I'm still there, cell phone and laptop, and I just but I'm okay with it. It just doesn't bother me. She's okay with it, but it's tough. It is really tough to actually surrender
It is.
and force yourself into that mode.
And I'm every bit as bad as you are. I've been Christmas morning talking on the phone, I mean, I have to say that if you choose this business, mortgage lending or real estate, that's what you're signing up for. If you're not available, somebody else is. So make yourself available.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I feel like I've lived in fear for so long, which is a good fear, that exactly what you just said. If we're not available, somebody else is. This is not to bash anyone, but I always laugh when I hear a lender or a realtor's voicemail. When I call them, they say, whatever, if it's Saturday past 2 p.m., I'll call you on Monday.
Yeah.
And I just think that if I'm a buyer or a seller and I call you Saturday, I wouldn't even leave a message. I would just move on to somebody else, because it's just the career we're signing up for.
I would agree. If there's one basic skill in this business, not even a skill or one basic premise, is availability. Because without that, you may as well do something else.
For sure. So I would say my takeaways for new people coming into this would be a business plan. I think that's a great idea. Investing in yourself, hiring, identifying your strengths and weaknesses, and hire in someone that can really help you out with your weaknesses. Conversations with your partner, and just kind of establishing what are the goals that you want, whether it's volume or vacations, whatever your goals are, and kind of building some parameters around that. Any other takeaways you love to leave with other people as we're wrapping up here?
Well, it's funny. I think all of those are valid. It's valid to say I want to sell 5 houses a year. I think that's I think that's a fair place to come from, and to accept that that doesn't mean failure. You don't have to set the bar against someone that's selling 150 houses a year. That's, you do what's right for you, your family, your life. There's no wrong answer.
For
And,
sure.
I look back on my career and I don't know what the right path was. I'm glad I chose the path I chose, but I also know that it came with sacrifice.
For sure. Absolutely.
But then a lot of reward as well, not just financial, but I truly love helping people in this process, and I always have. There's those dopamine hits that when you are successful in meeting someone's goals, that never goes away.
So do you think you have any version of retirement in the future?
For sure. For
Cool.
sure. That's one of the perks of working really hard for 25 years, is that option becomes available. So that is on the horizon.
Going into retirement, did you invest in real estate?
I did. Yeah, quite a bit along the way, and I've backed out from that a little bit over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think that I'm always shocked by how many realtors out there don't invest in their own product, or mortgage lenders, when we sell or fund one of the greatest investment opportunities anywhere. So that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when I was just talking to someone yesterday about this. When I look across my whole portfolio of investments, whether it be stock, startups, whatever it is, 9 times out of 10, with a few rare exceptions, the returns in real estate have been consistently the best returns. We're also lucky that we're in Boulder, Colorado.
True. Very
And,
true.
and we happen to time it pretty well in the growth cycle of Boulder.
That's right. Yep.
What's that saying? Past results aren't an indicator of future returns,
That is
but
true.
we have been a very consistent market that's been relatively resilient to outside influence.
Yeah, true. Well,
Yeah.
Steve, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you sharing a little part of your life and your career with us, and being so open with everything. And yeah, thank you so much for being here talking with us today.
Happy to do it, and thank you for everything that you do. I know you're a big part of this community as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.